Inside the room, once the door was closed, the atmosphere turned serious. YN motioned for the house mother to sit while looking at her with curiosity. YN, what did you want to talk about, mother? She asked gently, a smile still gracing her face. The house mother, quiet for a moment, her fingers interlocking nervously. Earlier, Mr. Kim asked me to help him pick up a gift from his room. When I went in, I accidentally saw a large framed photo on the wall. Is the woman in that photo Mr. Kim's wife? YN, chuckling softly. Of course, mother. Who else would it be? Dad wouldn't hang a neighbor's photo in his room, right? The house mother, why yes, that's true. But, her expression grew increasingly troubled. The house mother, has Mr. Kim ever told you that he actually had a daughter? YN, never. Taehyung is the only child in the Kim family. But why are you suddenly asking that? The house mother, YN maybe I just have the wrong person, but Mrs. Kim's face, her face looks exactly like the woman who left you on the street near the orphanage back then. YN, frowning, her face shifting to confusion. What do you mean? The house mother, maybe I am mistaken, but seeing Mrs. Kim's photo immediately reminded me of that night. Even though the streetlights weren't very bright then, I can still clearly remember the face of the woman who left you there. YN was struck speechless. The air in the room seemed to thin, and her body tensed instantly. The house mother, try asking Mr. Kim. I don't mean to speak recklessly, it's possible that you are actually their child. YN suddenly stared at the house mother in disbelief. She shook her head violently, as if trying to banish the insane possibility she had just heard. YN, that's impossible. Dad never said he had a daughter. There isn't a single photo in this house that shows the existence of a daughter. There are only photos of Dad, Mom, and Taehyung from the time he was a toddler until Mom passed away. Fear and anxiety suddenly surged through In's heart without mercy. All this time, she felt she could accept any bitter reality in her life, but not this one. She couldn't imagine if it turned out she shared a blood bond with Taehyung. The house mother, realizing the drastic change in In's expression, between overflowing anger and anxiety, felt guilty. The house mother, I'm sorry, YN. I just wanted to tell you. There's no harm in asking Mr. Kim directly to make sure. YN remained silent. She had no intention of responding, while her mind had already wandered far in a terrifying direction. After the heavy conversation in the room, YN and the house mother returned to the living room. Not long after, Seokjin, Yoongi, and Taehyung arrived home. Seokjin's birthday celebration, simple yet warm, began. Laughter erupted, the aroma of food filled the room, and the faces there radiated genuine happiness. However, in the midst of the bustle, YN felt as if she were in a different world. She remained mostly silent, her gaze vacant, and her smile no longer reached her eyes. The gloom enveloping her stood in stark contrast to the festivities surrounding her. Taehyung, who had been watching her the entire time, immediately approached. He could sense that something was wrong with his lover. Gently, he wrapped his arm around In's shoulders, trying to offer some warmth. Taehyung, baby, are you okay? Does something hurt? He asked in a tone filled with worry. YN looked up, staring intently at the face of the man beside her. In that instant, a heavy tightness spread across her chest. The memory of the house mother's words seemed to strike her all over again. Unconsciously, In's eyes began to well up, making the panic on Taehyung's face even more apparent. Taehyung, tell me, honey. You're sick, aren't you? Where does it hurt? YN, shaking her head slowly, trying to keep her tears from falling. Just a bit of a stomachache, but it's not bad. Don't worry. Taehyung, you look so pale. Let's go to the hospital right now, okay? Taehyung's expression showed just how deeply concerned he was for In's condition. YN, I told you, it's not that bad. It's probably because my period is coming soon, so my stomach is starting to feel cramped. Taehyung, in that case, should we just go to the room now? I'll apply some eucalyptus oil and rub your stomach until the pain goes away, YN. Later, honey. I'm really fine, I can still handle the pain. Taehyung. Sighing deeply, looking reluctant but trying to respect In's wishes. But please tell me immediately if the pain gets worse, okay? YN only gave a small nod while forcing a thin smile. Taehyung then shifted his gaze toward Seokjin, who was acting rowdy in the middle of the room. Seeing his brother so happy, Taehyung let out a faint smile. Meanwhile, YN continued to stare at the side profile of Taehyung's face with a profound sense of sadness. YN, it's impossible, right? We don't even look alike. I'm certain, we couldn't possibly be blood related. Her heart cried out silently, trying to reassure herself amidst the gripping fear. Once the event ended and the house mother and the children had gone home, the mansion grew quiet. Taehyung insisted on taking YN back to her room to ensure his lover rested comfortably. However, inside In's head, the anxiety only intensified. YN, honey, don't you have to go back to headquarters now? Go ahead, I'm really fine. Taehyung, but you're not feeling well. He said, still feeling heavy-hearted about leaving YN. YN, Yewon Ani is here to look after me. You should go, the matters there are important too, right? Taehyung finally let out a long sigh, surrendering to her gentle persuasion. He leaned in, planting a warm kiss on In's forehead and lips before finally saying goodbye to leave. The moment Taehyung's figure disappeared behind the door, Yewon immediately entered the room. The atmosphere shifted drastically, YN no longer appeared weak. Skillfully, she grabbed her laptop. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as she requested the phone number of Ryu Ji-yoon's mother. She began to track the elderly woman's coordinates. In truth, YN could have simply reported to her father that she had found the culprit who killed Mrs. Kim. However, there was a missing piece of the puzzle. She had to know the reason behind Ryu Ji-yoon's cruel actions. Considering Ryu Ji-yoon's unstable mental state, the only remaining source of information was her mother. YN was determined to do whatever it took, even use force, if the woman remained silent. In's brow furrowed as she saw a red dot blinking on her map screen. YN. Jeju. She murmured softly while looking at Yewon with a serious expression. She's in Jeju. Yewon, are you going there to meet her? YN. Nodding firmly. I have to ask many things regarding Ryu Ji-yoon. There is no other informant I can trust besides her mother. Yewon. Alright, if that's your decision. I'll go with you. YN nodded, but after that, she drifted into a long silence. Her thoughts wandered far, pulling back pieces of information that had been stored in the corners of her memory. The words of the doctor treating Ryu Ji-yoon suddenly rang clearly. Her mental state was disturbed because she lost her child and due to marital problems. Instantly, that memory collided with the confession she had just heard from the housemother. The face of the late Mrs. Kim, which was said to look exactly like the woman who abandoned her on the side of the road that night. Those two pieces of information swirled in her head, creating a terrifying and confusing common thread. YN clutched her head, which was starting to throb with pain. She closed her eyes tightly, trying to ward off the pain while calming her increasingly irregular heartbeat. She took long, deep breaths repeatedly, struggling to find air amidst the tightness crushing her chest. Yewon, do you want to book the plane tickets now? YN looked up, staring at Yewon with a gaze that still reflected the weight on her mind. However, her resolve was set. She reached into her bag, took out her phone, and handed it to Yewon. YN, Ani, you know how to use the ticket booking app, right? Yewon just gave a firm nod in response. Ani, please book the tickets to Jeju then. I have to go see my father first. Yewon nodded and took the phone without asking many questions. YN stepped hesitantly into her father's room after a soft knock. There, she saw the man who had raised her as his own daughter busy on a call on the balcony. While waiting, In's gaze drifted toward the large framed photo hanging on the wall, Mrs. Kim's beautiful and elegant face. In that second, the housemother's voice echoed again, making YN shake her head violently as if trying to banish the dark thoughts that were beginning to take root. Mr. Kim. Oh, YN ah. What is it, sweetheart? Mr. Kim ended his call and walked in with a fatherly smile. YN, I just wanted to let Dad know that I'm going to Jeju tomorrow morning. Yewan Iani is heading back, and Grandma wants me to go with her. Mr. Kim, will you be there for long? YN, shaking her head slowly while forcing a smile. No, Dad, there's a lot of work here. I'll talk to Grandma so she understands. Mr. Kim, alright then. Mr. Kim walked to his desk and sat down calmly. YN fell silent for a moment, her fingers interlocking nervously. YN, Dad, there's something I want to ask. Mr. Kim, looking at YN gently, ask what? YN, do you know someone named Ryu Ji-yoon? Mr. Kim's brow furrowed deeply. The name seemed to come from a past that was already covered in dust. Mr. Kim, Ryu Ji-yoon. The man fell silent for a few minutes, trying to dig through his old memories until finally, he nodded slowly. Mr. Kim. Ah, yes, I remember. She was a maid who used to work here when your mother was still alive. YN, frowning, her heart beating fast. A maid, she murmured almost inaudibly. Mr. Kim, but, how did you find out that name? YN, quiet for a moment, her brain spinning for an excuse. I just happened to hear it by accident. If I may ask, when did she start working here and when did she leave? Mr. Kim, I forget exactly when, but among many servants, she was the one who worked in this house for quite a long time. At the time, your mother said she quit because of urgent family problems. YN gripped the hem of her shirt tightly. That feeling of unease had now turned into a vivid fear. YN, alright, Dad. I just wanted to ask that. I'll be leaving for Jeju very early in the morning. Mr. Kim only nodded with a smile, though in his heart, he felt something was off. Why did YN suddenly bring up the name of someone who hadn't even been discussed for the past 22 years? However, he chose to keep it to himself, letting YN leave the room with a million burning questions. The following day, around 7 in the morning, Taehyung woke up and did not find YN beside him. Taehyung rushed to shower and dressed neatly. Afterward, he walked quickly to In's room, but he did not find his lover there either. Taehyung briefly thought YN might be in the dining room for breakfast, but in reality, she wasn't there. Taehyung felt incredibly annoyed after his father informed him that YN had left for Jeju in the early hours of the morning, around 5 o'clock. Taehyung tried calling his lover's phone, but it was inactive. He then contacted Grandma Lee, who said that YN had not yet arrived at her residence. Finally, Taehyung chose to wait until YN arrived at Grandma Lee's house. About an hour later, Grandma Lee contacted him and told him that YN had arrived. Without wasting time, Taehyung immediately called In's phone. Taehyung, so, can you explain why you left without saying goodbye to me? He asked in a cold, flat tone of voice. YN, I'm sorry, honey. It's not that I didn't want to say goodbye, but I was sure you would hold me back and not let me go to Jeju. I'm just dropping Yewan Iani off, I'll be back in Daegu this afternoon. Don't be mad anymore, okay? Taehyung, taking a long breath. Don't let it happen again. I don't like you leaving without letting me know first. He said in an annoyed tone. YN, yes, I promise. Oh, by the way, do you want me to bring you something? Some of Grandma's side dishes, maybe. Taehyung, whatever you want, the important thing is that you have to come home today. YN, yes, honey, I'm sorry. I love you. Taehyung, okay, I'll forgive you this time, baby. But if it happens again, I won't hesitate to punish you. I have to go now, I have a meeting with the members. YN, alright, I love you. Taehyung, I love you more, baby. He said before hanging up the phone. On the other side, Jeju, Grandma Lee's residence. After resting for a while, YN and Yewon rushed to the address of Ryu Ji-yoon's mother. About 30 minutes later, they arrived at a traditional Korean house that looked serene. YN pressed the doorbell, and shortly after, the door opened, revealing an elderly woman wearing an apron with hands still covered in flour. "I'm sorry, who are you looking for?" the elderly woman asked while looking at YN and Yewon alternately. "YN, we are from the psychiatric hospital, where your daughter has been treated all this time." The elderly woman looked shocked, her expression instantly turned to panic. "Grandma Ryu, did something happen to my daughter that the hospital came all the way here?" "YN, it's not like that, madam. Our visit is only to dig deeper into the triggers that caused Mrs. Ryu Ji-yoon's mental condition to be disturbed." Grandma Ryu went silent for a moment before finally inviting YN and Yewon inside. Grandma Ryu rushed to the kitchen to wash her hands before returning to the living room. YN looked at Grandma Ryu with a flat gaze. Initially, YN intended to be firm or even issue a threat to get the woman to talk. However, seeing the vulnerable figure in front of her, the soft side of In's heart was stirred. She was reminded of Grandma Lee, and it made her unable to act harshly. "YN, I'm sorry if we are disturbing your time. You know yourself that Mrs. Ryu Ji-yoon has been treated for a very long time. We worry that if left alone, she will be confined to the hospital forever. That's why we came to ask for details about the problem, so the doctor can determine the most suitable mental therapy. The doctor said you only mentioned she lost her mind due to losing a child. But I feel there is a heavier problem than that. If you don't mind, may we know what actually happened?" "Yewon, that's right, madam. We are very concerned because during 22 years of treatment, Mrs. Ryu Ji-yoon's health condition has shown no progress at all. If you would be willing to tell us in detail, maybe we could find a way to heal her." "Grandma Ryu, I will tell you everything, but I beg you, please do not spread this. I don't want my daughter to be even more stressed. YN, rest assured, the hospital keeps patient data strictly confidential." YN tried to smile calmly. Grandma Ryu, taking a long breath. "We used to live in Daegu. My daughter worked as a housemaid. My daughter said her employer was very kind. For the first year, everything seemed fine, but," her voice trembled as she held back tears. "One day, my daughter suddenly came home crying. I didn't know what happened, and she closed herself off, not wanting to say a word. Grandma Ryu, until a month later, my daughter began to fall ill. She often vomited and fainted. When I took her to the hospital, I was truly shocked to hear the doctor's explanation. My daughter was actually pregnant." YN suddenly froze. Her fingers gripped the edge of her clothes tightly, her feelings suddenly became very uneasy. "Grandma Ryu, at that time, I couldn't bear to ask, I could only cry. Why did this misfortune have to befall my daughter? She was a good girl, and her social life was very guarded." Grandma Ryu, finally, my daughter was willing to tell the story. A month before, she came home late at night as usual because she also had to care for her employer's child. After all the work was done, she turned off the lights before going home. However, suddenly, someone entered the house. It was very dark, so my daughter didn't see his face clearly. But from his posture, she was very sure that it was her own employer. Grandma Ryu, her employer came home heavily intoxicated and immediately pulled Ji-yoon forcibly into the guest room. Grandma Ryu's face turned red, holding back anger. "Everything just happened. My daughter had fought with all her might, but her employer's strength was much greater. No matter how loud she screamed, no one would hear because every room there was made soundproof." In's body tensed even more hearing Grandma Ryu's painful account. "Grandma Ryu, after hearing that, I told her to demand responsibility. However, at that time her male employer was not at home, so my daughter could only complain to the wife. But that woman instead accused my daughter of making it up. When Ji-yoon said she could prove it with a DNA test later, the employer's wife flatly refused and instead forced my daughter to abort the pregnancy. Grandma Ryu, my daughter insisted on keeping her fetus. That made the employer's wife furious. That very day my daughter was fired and threatened with many things if she didn't obey her wishes. My daughter and I fought desperately to protect that baby regardless of the threats from the employer's wife. Long story short, my daughter gave birth. It was a baby girl. Grandma Ryu smiled bitterly while wiping her tears. Grandma Ryu, 4 months after giving birth, that's where it all began. My granddaughter suddenly disappeared during her vaccination schedule at the hospital. No one saw who entered the room and took the baby away. It happened very quickly. Grandma Ryu, my daughter often went on rampages and cried looking for her child. Her mental state became increasingly shaken until I couldn't handle it anymore and decided to take her to a psychiatric hospital. 2 months later, I was confused again because there was a large bank bill. It stated that a month earlier my daughter had borrowed about 20 million won. At first I didn't believe it. How could she do that while ill? Grandma Ryu, but the hospital confirmed that my daughter had run away for 3 days and was found in a small alley nearby. Maybe that's when she went to the bank. I never knew what that much money was for and what it was used for. Grandma Ryu, I also wonder how Ji-yoon could prepare all those complicated documents to apply for that loan. Yewon, the hitman community can help handle things like that, as long as there is a signature from the person concerned. Yewon whispered to YN, who looked transfixed. YN only nodded slowly. Her mind was no longer focused there. Her head felt heavy trying to piece together Grandma Ryu's story with what she knew from her adoptive father and the housemother. YN, Madam, if I may know, what about Mrs. Ryu Ji-yoon's employer after that? Grandma Ryu, I don't know. Since my daughter's pregnancy hit 7 months, she never threatened or appeared in front of us again. YN, alright, madam. Thank you very much for your time. And if I may know, do you still remember the address of your daughter's former employer? We just want to make sure that those people will never bother Mrs. Ryu Ji-yoon again. Grandma Ryu nodded and mentioned an address. Yewon gasped upon hearing it and immediately looked at YN with a look that was hard to interpret. YN, alright, thank you. In that case, we'll take our leave now. Grandma Ryu, smiling while nodding. Be careful on the road. YN stared at Grandma Ryu for quite a long time, as if wanting to save that memory, before finally stepping away toward the car and leaving the residence. Inside the car, a chilling silence filled the cabin. Yewon repeatedly glanced at YN, who was just staring blankly at the road ahead. Yewon, YN the address of Ryu Ji-yoon's employer that the grandmother mentioned earlier. Isn't that exactly the address of your family's mansion? She asked in a very cautious tone, as if afraid to touch a wound that had just been opened. YN nodded slowly, her movements feeling stiff. I already asked my father before. He indeed knows Ryu Ji-yoon. He said that Ryu Ji-yoon was a maid who used to work at the Kim family residence. Yewon appeared stunned, her breath caught for a moment as the puzzle pieces began to merge in her head. So, is it true that the man who got Ryu Ji-yoon pregnant was Mr. Kim? And if that's true, it's very likely that the one who kidnapped Ryu Ji-yoon's child was Mrs. Kim herself. It seems Ryu Ji-yoon also thought so, to the point that she was desperate enough to hire a hitman to finish off Mrs. Kim out of resentment. YN fell silent, her face growing increasingly pale. She remembered her father's words admitting that he knew Ryu Ji-yoon and that the woman was a former maid in their house. Her memory then drifted to the housemother's words, saying that Mrs. Kim looked very similar to the woman who abandoned her on the street near the orphanage when she was still a baby. YN, I have to see for myself, she murmured softly. Yewon, now, what are you going to do? She asked in a low voice, trying to find certainty in the midst of this chaos. YN took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in her fingers that were still gripping the edge of the seat. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead, as if she were mapping out a big plan in her head. YN, I'm going back to Daegu. I'll settle everything there. Iani, you don't need to come with me anymore. Stay with Grandma and please take good care of her. She said with a firm tone but hiding bitterness. Yewon could only nod slowly, understanding that this was a storm YN had to face personally. YN, thank you very much, for being willing to help me all this time. Yewon, nodding slowly while touching In's shoulder to give strength. I understand. I hope everything can be resolved well, YN ah. Silence enveloped them once again. Upon arriving at Grandma Lee's residence, YN rested her body for a moment. However, her mind wandered far, making her unfocused as Grandma Lee spoke softly while affectionately stroking her head. In's gaze at Grandma Lee felt so difficult to interpret, there was deep love, but also great anxiety tucked within. After a few moments, YN asked permission to return to Daegu that same afternoon. Although it was quite difficult to persuade Grandma Lee, who wanted her to stay longer, in the end, YN managed to convince her grandmother. That same afternoon, YN immediately rushed to the airport to catch a flight to Daegu. On the plane, YN just sat silently staring at the expanse of clouds from behind the window, while her heart continued to beat fast, imagining the truth that awaited her at the Kim family home. That intersection of fate now felt so real. Upon arriving in Daegu, YN immediately stepped into the Kim family mansion. However, the atmosphere of the house felt quiet. She did not find anyone there except the servants busy with their work. YN briefly planned to go straight to the hospital, but before she could actually step out, the roar of a car engine was heard in the yard. Taehyung suddenly came home. Without wasting time, the man immediately rushed over and greeted YN with a warm hug that was very tight. In's feelings became even more chaotic. Usually, Taehyung's hug was always the most calming place for her, but this time it felt different. There was a tightness crushing her chest, a deep sadness that suddenly surged to the surface. Taehyung, where are you going again, baby? You just arrived, but you're already about to leave again. He asked softly while slightly loosening his hug. YN, not going anywhere. I was planning to catch up with you at the headquarters earlier. YN said, trying her best so that her voice didn't sound trembling like someone who wanted to cry. Taehyung released his hug completely, then looked at In's face with a wide, sincere smile. Taehyung, no need to bother. You only need to contact me, and I will definitely come to see you immediately. YN could only smile faintly. That chaotic feeling made her surge forward again, hugging Taehyung very tightly as if not wanting to let go. She hid her face in the crook of the man's neck, inhaling Taehyung's familiar scent. YN, honey, I love you so much. She whispered with a voice that was almost drowned out. Taehyung chuckled softly, his smile growing even wider hearing that confession. Taehyung, I know. And you know how much I love you, baby. YN buried her face even deeper. The tears she had been holding back finally fell, wetting Taehyung's shoulder. YN, I can accept all the problems that come into my life, but not this one. I really hope. I am not that woman's child, she thought sorrowfully, while her heart throbbed with pain imagining the bitter possibility she would have to face later.